So a lot of things come down to the demographics of people, what people are doing with their daily life and how that's affecting the economy. Of course, a lot of young people are saddled with student loan debt, auto loan debt, childcare debt, and many to go on and on and on, which I won't get into. But a lot of people are pushing off marriage for a reason. Either it's too hard in the dating world, which I think a lot of it is that case because of social media, and more so because of economics. Things are too expensive, and people are finding, unfortunately, they're getting married later. And what does that do to home ownership? It delays home ownership for the first time home buyer. We saw the news statistic. The average first time home buyer is now 40 years old. I think last year was about 38, but now it's 40 years old. So that's obviously going to, make things not very well for the American people that are trying to own homes. But those that have owned homes for many years, they are, of course, benefiting. And that's why the whole connotation of the boomer is kind of negative, because a lot of these young millennial Generation Z have been really, or the Zoomers have been really upset about what has been happening with the boomer, generation, what they've been doing to the country. But there's always someone to blame, I think a lot of people want to blame someone, and in many cases they might be correct. But at the end of the day, you have to make your own decision, and you have to plan strategically ahead of time to get where you want to be, because I don't think the government will ever be there to help you. At the end of the day, it's going to be more so detrimental, I think, than anything, for the most part anyways. I'm not going to say always, but for the most part. So I want to get into the data that's going to be helpful for us to kind of wrap our heads around what's going on. And then I'll talk about the 50-year mortgage in a little bit more in detail, why I'm against it to some degree, but also for it. What I've seen as a seasoned real estate agent and what you read in articles, the reality is true. There's what's called Nepo home buyers. Now, it's given the data that about 39% of all homeowners receive down payment help from parents or some source of support. That's quite a lot of bit of people. Now, when it comes to the younger generations like Gen Z or millennials are getting 54% of those home buyers are getting help from parents or some type of support for the down payment money. And then 78% of them are getting it as well in the Gen Z bracket. So, of course, it makes sense, because saving for a down payment where wages are down, you're going to need some help. And if you have a family member that has that money to gift you the money, it only makes sense why you're doing that. So I don't blame them. What I feel bad for is people that don't have that money from their parents or a family member that can gift them that money. But I think that's why it's so important. I feel like a lot of parents or older people that have a home have more of an ability to do things because they have that equity to work with. They've been able to, keep their housing situation payment lower than if you're always renting and, moving around. So that's why it's helpful to, own property and have your family members own property, so everyone can be on that equal playing field per se. But if you don't, then you're kind of in a bad luck situation where you can't even get gift money. So that's kind of where that's at. And another statistic that came out from Northwestern Mutual, which was really sad to see because of the reality of what people are going through. The people that don't get gift money, I feel like, fall into this bracket, which is more than 50% of Gen Zers and nearly 60% of millennials reported that they're depending on their inheritance to achieve financial security and retire in comfort, meaning they need to wait for their parents to pass away or their grandparents or someone so that they can live their life and own something. And that's really depressing to hear that. But that's just, I guess, the reality of where we're at nowadays. But I don't know. It's really sad, but it's definitely not strategic. You need to plan, whether you're in that position or not, waiting for a family member to pass away and get that inherited. Whether that's the case, you need to plan so you can get it on your own, at least try to. And I think one of the best ways of doing that is to probably get married, because now you have dual incomes. You're able to feel a little bit better and have breathing room. I know society steers people away, or has. I think it's kind of coming back now to be single and go date and do all this crap. And it's obviously not helping people. It's probably best to find your partner and go forward and financially find independence. So let's get into demographics of first-time home buyers, because I did say it's about age 40 based on the statistics. But if we look at this graph from National Association of Realtors, it kind of narrows things down even further. Now let's take a look at this graph So the first time home buyer is now 40 years old, but the repeat buyers is 62 years old or 60 years old, one of the two. That is horrible, guys. That means older people are the only ones that have the ability to continuously buy after their first home. Sometime later on in their life, they're buying another home. And that's what we're seeing is older people buying homes. Again, because they went in when home prices were a lot lower back in the day. And also the wages were probably much better than they are now. So that's something to take into account. And here it breaks it down even further. So approximately when it comes to the first time home buyer, 50% of them are married couples. And then the remaining first time home buyers, 25% are single women. Totally agree. I've seen it with my own clients. A lot of single women doing their thing. So congrats to them. That's amazing. Only 10% are single men. So they're really falling behind. And then the other 15% are unmarried couples or household compositions of all sorts. So that's where it comes down to 50% are married couples. So that's why I'm saying like finding a partner and forming your own foundation of finance independence. I think that's the way to go. And a lot of the women are doing good too on their own. I mean, 25%, that's a lot. And the men are the ones that are really suffering. And I think a lot of that is just the mindset, unfortunately. A lot of what they've been taught, it's just not good. Video games, focusing on stuff like that, and not really getting their act together and being ambitious is hurting them a lot. Here's a graph that has been recirculating since the 50-year mortgage has come up. And Marjorie Taylor Greene was the first one, I believe, one of the first ones to share this that went wildly out there. But that is the percentage of 30-year-olds who are both married and homeowners is only 12%, when back in the 1950s was about 50% of the population. Now, I looked online to see how accurate that is, and it basically told me it's very accurate, but there's no specific statistic tailored to 30-year-olds only, just 30-year-olds, not early 30s, not people in their 30s, but 30 years old. So I got additional data to share with you. So the number of homeowners in their early 30s that own a home is 50%. Not bad. The number of Americans in their 30s that are married is 57%. So it's a lot higher than I expected, although I do see that statistic to tread downward as time goes on, because of course, people are getting married later, having babies later, getting a house way later because of everything we've already discussed. The public data from sources like iProperty Management show that as of late 2025 data, only about 49.2% of people aged 30 to 34 own a home, regardless of marital status. And I think, again, without marriage and kids, home ownership feels more pointless and is more out of reach financially. So that's kind of the problem here. But somehow they got the data that it comes down to 12%. So I guess 50% times 57%, you get a lower percentage, of course. And somehow they were able to factor in 30-year-olds particularly, and they got 12%. Obviously, that's horrible if that's the case. You go from 50% in 1950. You would think with time in a country, things would get better. Not that, before that time when we first became a country, it obviously had improved. But I feel like the 1950s and 60s is when things after that went downward. And maybe it's all the wars. I don't know. I mean, we could get into that some other time, but something's wrong. Something's not good right now. And it's really unfortunate to see. But FDR, I believe in the 1940s, what he did was he started the whole 30-year mortgage because he wanted to encourage people to own. I think at the time, there was only 15-year mortgages, maybe. I might be wrong. But he added the 30-year mortgage, and that increased home ownership percentage of Americans to own a home. President Trump is trying to do the same exact thing.